Today's a bit different. It's coffee with a commissioner, but in reverse. So normally you're interviewing somebody. Now you're on the other side of this
I'm sat on this side of the desk today, yeah.
Brilliant. So introduce yourself to your listeners.
My name is Steve Turner. I am Cleveland's Police and Crime Commissioner. And I was elected to do this role in May 2021.
So 2021. Wow, time's gone quick there, hasn't it? So I think it'd be really good for people to really understand is your background. You know, what's your connection with Cleveland?
I was born here, so 1971, Overdene Hospital in Saltburn. It was so born there. After about 6 months, my family moved away. Spent 2 years in South Africa. My dad worked for a mining company. My mum was stay at home. South Africa was a very, very different place back in the early 70s, and I know my mum in particular hated it, which was why we didn't stay longer than we did. Coming back, mum was from Dormanstown, dad was from Grangetown, so we moved back. A house in Dormanstown, council house in Dormanstown, and that was where I spent most of my formative years, if you like. Junior school in Dormanstown, senior school went by the name of Westfield when I was there. Is now an Outwood Academy, but was quite a tough place to grow up, if I'm honest. From that, I left school. I was working from being about 14, 15 in a pizza shop. Left school at 16, moved away, managed a pizza shop in Mansfield, and then came back and did a YTS. For those of you old enough to remember a YTS, it was £25 a week and a sort of modern apprenticeship, if you like. Did that, worked in retail. I've sold everything from bricks to hoovers to baked beans and computers, and really enjoyed it. Really enjoyed my life in retail, but then got involved in politics, mainly on the back of a new housing development that was due to go up the back of where I lived. My councillor, I didn't feel, was representing the residents particularly well. Believed I could do a better job, and I suppose that's always been my thing with politics. I'm a big believer in the fact that if you're not happy with something, or if you believe something should be done a different way, there's no point just being a bit of a keyboard warrior and whinging and moan about it. Put yourself out there, actually go out and do something about it. And that's what I did. The Police and Crime Commissioner thing came about. I'm looking at that, and I'm seeing the police force, and I'm seeing Cleveland Police deteriorate, right, before our very eyes, really, over a number of years. And again, I can shout and I can complain and I can moan, but I genuinely felt I could do a better job, because the role of, and I suppose we'll touch on that, the role of the Police and Crime Commissioner, it's not a policing role. So you don't need policing skills to be able to do it. And I felt I had some really good transferable skills that would do that. So I just put myself forward for that.
I understand the role.
What a few that do.
Well, a few that do, but I think I'm also a very few that actually probably serves as specialist police constable as well in Durham Constabulary. So I understand the role of a police officer as well. So what made you want to go for that?
The thing nobody really understands about the Police and Crime Commissioner role amongst the general public is it's not operational. I'm not Commissioner Gordon from Batman.
Do you think people make that assumption when they see stuff on TV and like the American approach to it?
Yeah, and it doesn't help with the fact that the Chief Constable in the Met's called the Police Commissioner, and people think you have operational control, and I don't. Even last night I received an irate message from a gentleman who was unhappy at the way a police officer had dealt with his wife, and it was my fault. And I think, well, you're upset and I can help you go forward with this, but I can't go to that police officer and say you did wrong here, because that's just not my job. And it's the same when people see crimes happening, and I am often a port of call for them to say, well, no, I'm not your local officer. This isn't what the PCC role does. The PCC role is strategic, and it's about holding the force to account. And so that's the policing element of the Police and Crime Commissioner role. The commissioning role is huge. So we commission victim services, we grant fund domestic violence organisations, we work in educational environments, and we work with school children, and we do all sorts of proactive work alongside the police and local authorities and other partner agencies to try and drive a better environment, either for people to live in and work in, or for people who have sadly been victims of crime, and we need to support them. So that commissioning side of my role is huge, and that again is the fundamental reason. So I hate the hypocrisy in politics. I love my role in the fact that I can really make a difference, whether that's supporting an organisation with a grant fund or helping promote the work they do through social media and through visits and things like that. That side of it, I can make a real impact on, more so than I would suggest even MPs, because unless you're physically part of the government, if you're an opposition MP or you're even a backbench MP within the government, your day-to-day impact can be very minimal.
Yeah.
Very minimal, whereas my role's got real teeth, and we can make a real positive difference.
It's like being on the front bench of the politics.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So 2021, you're elected in. What's been your thought process of the job so far? What was your expectations? Is it any different to what you thought it was going to be?
Yeah, without doubt. So there's a few things I expected. So I knew I'd done a lot of research. I'd spoke to a lot of different people. I knew the force was in a bad way.
Yeah.
We'd been in special measures since 2019. We were the worst force in the country by far, and everybody accepted that. And we weren't coming out of that anytime soon. So I knew that going in. I'd probably underestimate, even as bleak as the picture I was painted, and I knew what I was going into, I still underestimated the scale and the size of that problem, because it ran throughout the whole force.
So you mentioned their special measures. For your listeners who might not be aware, what is a special measure and why do forces get put into it?
So every force is inspected by HMIC FRS.
Is it a bit like an Ofsted?
Yes. Yeah.
Ofsted inspection
it's a bit
for
like
schools.
an Ofsted inspection for schools, yeah. Or an audit of whatever description. So every force comes in and they're audited across a whole range of things. And Cleveland was the only force ever to be graded inadequate in all 6 potential areas you could be inspected on. And that hadn't happened before. South Yorkshire was the previous worst. Just after the whole Hillsborough thing, they'd been graded inadequate in 4, and it took them 4 years to come out of just those 4, and we had 6. And you look at it, and what it doesn't measure, it's not measuring financial performance, for example. It's not measuring, well, have you got enough officers to do this, or have you made cuts, blah, blah. It's measuring real core things. Are you recording crime correctly? Are you looking after victims? Do you understand what your demand's telling you? How are you leading your force? How are your workforce performing? So it's all of those measures within an organisation. So you could have 10 crimes, not solve any of them, but if you've done the right things on all 10 of them, you'll be graded as excellent. So it's not about where the crime was, but it's the way it works is if you are underperforming, your crime is probably going up as well.
I think you would say that is probably a significant milestone achieved from the force to be coming out with special measure.
Coming out of that. So that was my number one priority. And the interesting thing about special measures, what people don't see, is we have what's called PPOG, so Police Performance Oversight Group. And once a quarter, myself, the Chief Constable, senior leaders within the force, go to London to be questioned and challenged on what we've done in that last quarter against the targets we've set ourselves. And they were quite brutal in the early instances. So Tom Windsor used to chair them. You've got members of the Home Office, College of Policing, senior officials from every department that has an impact. And everybody is literally staring at the two of you saying, what are you doing? Right? What are you doing to turn this force around? And in those early days, it was really tough, really tough. We've come through that. So a combination of the work my team have done around scrutiny, around challenge, around support for the force, bringing in the new Chief Constable was the catalyst we needed. I needed somebody with a level of experience and, more importantly, a desire to really turn a performance of the force round.
So at the end of 2023 now, so I would say special measures obviously a significant success marker for yourself,
Yeah.
and for the force more importantly. What would you say with your other kind of two?
If I had to talk about my top three, obviously coming out of special measures is huge, and we're probably 6 to 9 months earlier than I expected that. I said on the day I was elected, I said it would probably take me 2 terms to see significant traction on that, and we've done it within one. So we can really move forward on that. The other thing I'm really, really proud of this year is we've achieved a customer service accreditation for our resolution team, which is effectively our complaints triage team. There isn't another force in the country that have got this award. In fact, there isn't another force in the country that's even gone for this award.
Yeah.
So we're unique in that. And that shows that things do go wrong. Everybody accepts things go wrong. Police officers are human. The force isn't infallible. We make mistakes. But when they do, it's about making sure we do the right things and we take the learnings from that. And that's what this customer service accreditation gives us, because it shows that not only are we recording the dissatisfaction, not only are we helping the members of the public who feel they've had a poor service from Cleveland Police, but we're also recording that and learning from it, and we can show where those learnings have gone back into force. And to achieve that, and again, that's been 18 months in the working to get to that point. And like I said, we are the only force in the country that's got that accreditation now, which puts us out there as quite clearly the number one force in the country for how we deal with that. And then and I can't sit here and talk about my best achievements without talking about copper and the work you and all labs have done with that. Again, that's something that currently it doesn't exist anywhere else in the country in that format. Every time we talk to members of the public now, they love it, and we're starting to see some fantastic success. People that are feeding in information about drug dealing, about off-road bikes, about cannabis houses, suspicious behaviour. The force are getting really adept now at picking that information up, pulling it together with other information that come in from other areas and utilising it. And if we talk about off-road bikes, which has been the number one issue for me, so in 6 months between April and October this year, Cleveland Police has seized over almost 500 vehicles, whether quads or bikes. Now, to put that in perspective, in the whole of last year, we probably seized less than 100.
So for the audience that may not be aware, what is Copper?
So Copper's an app, Cleveland Online Policing app, and it gives members of the public an opportunity to quickly and easily upload information into the force. Now, there's options on there to report crime, which you might get a crime number, and you might just say, right, well, my shed was broken into, so-and-so was taken, I need a crime number for my insurance company, and you can report it that way. You can report things directly to your local authority, whether that's fly tipping, neighbourhood nuisance, parking issues. You can go to the DVLA about untaxed vehicles, or you can come through the force and provide information. The media, the photographs, the videos we've had of people riding off-road bikes is just phenomenal, and that's proving to be a real success. And it's free, it's easy to download. Once you're registered, you can upload a video and some text and a report of an incident within about 90 seconds.
So another thing you're probably not being aware of, Steve, is last week I had a conversation with a dev team that actually built a single online home.
All right.
Asking us how we did it.
Brilliant.
So I think, I think part of the original discussions that we had as part of the development cycle was single online home does exist. It's still there. It's obviously, you can access it through the Cleveland Police website. But one thing we realised straight away is it's quite a long, lengthy process. I think it was 38 pages or something that we worked out. And when my team were looking at mind mapping the whole exercise, we thought, wow, if you want to submit something, I'd get bored by page 10, and I'd lose interest and then just go, I'll leave it. Yeah. But I think from a Cleveland Police, from the Crime Commissioner's office, I think from a significant dev house that's built the single online home to then approach us to go, actually, what was the methodology? How did you manage to simplify a complex process? Yeah. I think probably speaks volumes. And
you've had interest in other forces as
yes,
well, haven't
so
you?
Scotland Police are now have engaged a conversation with us to see how how the system works, what sort of data are we pushing out, how is it helping the force, how easy is it to use. And we've also had interest from the London Met, which is a significant one. So to be able to be, I would say, a relatively small force across the United Kingdom to lead the biggest, to two of the biggest forces, to go, actually, here's a much more simpler way of capturing it. What's been kind of your biggest challenge, probably this year or going back from when you've started? What sort of challenges that you face?
The number one thing that frustrates me and the public of Cleveland is, and our police officers, and you'll have seen this yourself, Imran, as a special. Police officers do a brilliant job 99% of the time. They catch the bad guys, they do the work. There's an awful lot of paperwork involved to get to a charging point. In my mind, all too often they are let down by somebody putting this arbitrary line in that says, we don't think there's enough evidence there for you to go to charge, or even worse, it going to charge and it go to court. Why we aren't consistently applying a tougher punishment to the people that need it. There will always. I'm a big believer in rehabilitation and a big believer in supporting people, so they don't commit crime going forward. But there has to be a punishment, and it's got to be consistent. And I think the problem we've got now is it's not consistent. There are people going to court for waving a machete around in the street that aren't going to jail.
Is it more training required? Is it, do this judges and magistrates need to be in the streets a bit more with the officers to understand exactly what's going on and I think, kind of live and feel that?
Firstly, I think, so the legislation's there, right? The sentencing powers are there. If you're supplying Class A drugs, you can go to jail for 10 years, right? For a first offence, right? It's as simple as that. But those offences aren't handed out. And part of the problem, I was chatting to a magistrate or a former magistrate, and she was saying, if you can give a 10-year sentence, but on average others are only giving a 2-year sentence, if you suddenly hand out a 5 or a 6-year sentence, you're out of kilter. And then good lawyers will then argue in an appeal that the sentence was disproportionately high and you potentially risk somebody getting an even lesser sentence because you've tried to be harsher. And that's where we have to draw the line. I think the appeal system for sentences is where we need to look at, and do we make it tougher to appeal those sentences? Do we give judges and magistrates more confidence to do that?
So one thing I've always looked at is the benchmarking for the UK is pretty poor. So, and that goes back to if one judge awards a 2 years, but in reality it should have been 5.
Yeah,
you automatically, with very sophisticated, you've set a precedent to go, well, so and so shouldn't be allowed this because overall, X, Y, and Z court case said they got X, so you need to benchmark it to that. Yeah. So, do we need to start increasing the benchmark for the crimes and the punishment levels up across the country in order then to drive along the punishment?
There's a good argument for that, and I can see where we need to go that. But then you've got to look at every crime on its merits, every crime, because you might have a 13-year-old carrying a knife because he's been threatened every day for the last month by somebody else who's carrying a knife.
Yeah.
And so in his head, that's the right thing to do. You can't give those two people the same punishment. So you've got to look at every crime on its merits. What you can't do is benchmark on a sentence. You've got to benchmark on circumstances.
And so, into 23, what are the next for your officers? So that you've already done quite a bit. There's been a lot of stuff in between since we've had COVID and lockdowns and that to deal with through the force as well. I guess that brought its own unique challenges as well. But what do you see the next steps for the office?
For my office, so with scrutiny now, we're focused very much on outcomes. So we're in a good place. We've got great foundations within the force. We've got great processes. We know where our demand is. We've got a plan to go forward with that. It's now about challenging our office or our leadership to say, right, well, where are we seeing that drive down in outcomes? And we saw this over the summer. Normally, antisocial behaviour spikes over the summer in every force in the country. We flatlined over the summer, so that's a massive success to not see that antisocial behaviour spike. So those are the types of things we're challenging the force with. But then, more importantly, from my office, we're really starting to get into the weeds of those drivers of crime. So I'm doing an awful lot of work at the minute on rehabilitation of offenders, supporting homeless people, because in any society, if you don't have a stable home and you don't have a job to go to, you are much more likely to commit crime. If you're coming out of prison, and the figures show that if you come out of prison without a home and a job, 86% reoffend.
Wow.
Whereas if
That's a high number, yeah.
Whereas if you come out of prison with a home and a job, only 14% reoffend. We're really targeting that element of how do we get people coming out of prison into a job, and how do we give them a stable, secure home in a nicer environment than they're currently going into. And if we can get that right, and if we can cut reoffending in Cleveland's got one of the highest reoffending rates in the country. We can cut reoffending, we really do start to drive down crime in a big way. Far more. We're never going to arrest our way out of some of these problems. We need to address the underlying things. So that rehabilitation of reoffenders piece is a big passion for me. The drug dealers, as opposed to I chair the region's Combating Drugs Partnership as one of my roles, and we're looking at different ways to support addicts, right, and stop people getting into cannabis, into cocaine and amphetamines in the first place. But also there's an enforcement arm of that as well, and what the police do around targeting those people further up the food chain. Right, so we can pick a dealer up on any street corner any day of the week, but at any given hour of the week. But it's the people that are supplying them, and those are the people we need to start to target.
Brilliant. Steve, been a pleasure speaking with you. Thank you for giving us the opportunity to ask you those questions. So if anybody wants to know about where to find the podcast, where they can listen to on Apple, Spotify, or any of your major podcasting apps, we'll have the link to the podcast.
They certainly will. And anybody that has any questions or wants to get in touch with my team, do so at the PCC website.
Brilliant. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Good to be on this side of the table.